What things do you do that are totally normal for you, but others describe as strange? Scott, is that you? I had a coworker that was heavy into technology. Hundreds of servers at home and his cottage, complete with fantastic monitoring systems, cameras, etc. Miles of fiber at his house, on top of running his own damn fiber lines to his cottage. Guy is a multi-million in crypto. Got in earlier and has continued mining and holding for years, plus all his equipment. He still drives a 20-year-old, rusted-out vehicle. He's constantly fixing it as it breaks down. He hates mechanical work to boot. Doesn't plan on replacing it. In short, massive geek, brilliant fellow, millionaire in cash, crypto and assets. Owns a beautiful house and another beautiful cottage. He drives a 20-year-old, rusted-out car around. You'd never know by simply looking at him that he's got millions. You'd assume he was a broke 40-year-old, unmarried. He's married, been married for 15 years-ish, homeless person. My text messages are always grammatically correct and have complete sentences. Similarly, feel free to peruse my 5+ years here on Reddit. This level of effort really freaks out some people. Plus I count characters, keeping them to 160 or less, in case my recipients are using SMS protocols. Basically, I put more care into text messages than anybody I know, on average. Besides the character counting, I'm with you. I try and be grammatically correct for the most part. Sometimes there are times where I take a bit of liberty, but usually for effect, emphasis. There are very few words I shorten, most common being cuss for because. I never do for you though. I actually have to think more to type that because I'm such a fast typer. And I'm also that weirdo who spells out okay instead of just doing okay. Not sure when I started that habit, but have entirely no intention on quitting. And Junius Bobbledunary spake, saying, First shalt thou take out the holy carton, then shalt thou count to 3, no more no less. 3 shall be the number thou shalt count, and the number of the counting shall be 3. 4 shalt thou not count, neither count thou 2, excepting that thou then proceed to 3. 5 is right out. Once the number 3, being the third number, be reached, then lobbest thou thy holy scrambled eggs of Antioch towards thy foe, who, being naughty in my sight, shall snuff it. Walking on tiptoes. I've done it for as long as I can remember and I don't realize I'm doing it until someone says, oh, you walk on your tiptoes. Did you do ballet? Or doesn't that hurt? Why do you do it? I used to explain to the latter that no, it doesn't hurt, and I've done it for as long as I can remember. Sometimes it's easier to tell people that I did do ballet, even though I never have, and they drop it. Haha. I wish I knew why I did it. Some people think I started doing it when I met my boyfriend, as he's 6'6" and I'm 5'2", but that is not the case. I tend to talk to myself, especially if I'm alone. I try not to do it in public, though I do occasionally mumble to myself. I remember a little while ago I was talking to 2 friends of mine, both who know I talk to myself. One of them even admits to doing it as well. I was telling them that I was thinking about buying one of those Bluetooth earpieces, just to wear and seem less weird when I accidentally talk to myself in public. The friend who also talks to herself thought it was a brilliant idea. The other friend thought we were weird. I like fried bologna, as in I'll throw a couple of slices in a pan and fry them up before putting them on my sandwich. Then some ketchup and chips, usually Cool Ranch Doritos, before putting the top slice of bread on. I also lightly toast the bread first because I find the sandwich doesn't get soggy from the ketchup as quickly if the bread is slightly toasted. It's my favorite comfort meal, a fried bologna and chips sandwich with a soda, preferably Grape Crush or a Cherry Coke. I speak encouraging words to inanimate objects that are not functioning as expected. Example, when I was a cashier and the register was slower than normal, I would pet it and say in a sing-song voice, "Come on, you can do it." Or if a door is particularly difficult to open, I might say, "I know you're supposed to keep stuff out, but it's okay to let me in." I also apologize if I accidentally misuse things, like if I grind the gear while driving. I pat the dash and say, "Sorry, baby." If alone, I like to sleep when I'm tired and eat when I'm hungry. I have ADHD and I don't really feel like I have any control over when I'm going to be feeling energized and focused and when I'm going to be a complete potato that wants to lay around scrolling Reddit or napping. So sometimes when I'm feeling it, I'll stay up all night gaming and then nap the next 2 days, but I never know when I'm gonna just randomly be turned on. It's hard to plan around when my brain wants to cooperate with what I wanna do. I also have a hard time motivating myself to eat until it's physically uncomfortable. So my relationship with food is very much a functional one and I can be perfectly content eating PB&J every day. Been rough for me adjusting to living with my GF recently because everything has become so routine and normal and I'm so spoiled and blessed to have her, but sometimes I just wanna go savage for like 72 hours and do whatever my brain tells me it feels like doing. I always shower before I go to the gym if I have just woken up. There's something about showering that takes me from groggy, gross feeling to feeling mentally alert and prepared for the training session. I'm fully aware it's kind of wasteful, and I do try to go without a shower first, but it's simply not the same. I believe I've tricked my mind into thinking I'm not fully prepared to train in the mornings until I've showered. I have showered with a good friend while drunk, and casually hung out with my group of 5 friends naked in one of their houses, after a pool party, also drunk. It sounds like something straight out of some cliché lesbian porno, but I swear it was all very platonic lol. We're just that comfortable with each other. We also go to the sauna together, so it's NBD at all in other situations. I put my fast food in an insulated shopping bag to keep it warm during the drive home. Without the insulated bag, the car's air conditioning makes the food cold by the time I get home. Then I have to microwave it to heat it up, which kills the flavor. One downside to insulated bags is sometimes the food gets saggy, but I accept the trade-off for the food staying hot. Got the idea after I'd accumulated so many insulated shopping bags that were given away for free at events and by restaurants. So one day after picking up food, I saw the insulated bag in my car and decided to use it. Now I wish I had thought of it sooner. Other people don't describe it as strange, but it is often something I have to explain to people, especially those who know me and my family, but not this dynamic. I call my sister KK in lieu of her real name, and I've done this for as long as I can remember. Her middle name is K, but aside from that connection I've no clue how I picked up the habit, and especially at such a young age. If I call her by her first name, it is way too weird for both of us. It's like calling my mom by her first name. Between me and her, she is KK, but sometimes I forget that not everyone who know the two of us are familiar with that dynamic. For example, last month I went to visit a family member I hadn't seen in a few years, and she had to interrupt all of the catch-up stories I was telling her to ask "And KK is a friend of yours?" Visiting different supermarkets. I very rarely visit a supermarket more than 3 times in a row before I go to another one. Sometimes I go to a different area in the city, sometimes a different city, or, at the moment, even a different island. Sometimes I go by car, sometimes motorcycle, sometimes public transport, sometimes I walk. Different supermarkets have different products and different vibes. I never stay long. I don't have a sort of weird supermarket obsession. I more likely have an I get bored thing. The way I do math is the same way my mom does math, and we both got scolded in school because it wasn't the right way. I break everything into 10s/multiples of 10 and keep the extra aside for the end. So 57 plus 45 would happen in my brain like 57 plus 3 equals 60 plus 40 equals 100 plus 2 equals 102, or 50 plus 40 equals 90 plus 12 equals 102. I do the same thing with subtraction, multiplication, and percentages. Find the nearest multiple of 10, then the next, etc. etc. I've been told that that's more work and not the correct way, but it's legit the only way I can make my brain process numbers and come up with the correct answer. And despite it looking really long when written out, it doesn't really take me long to make the calculation in my head. Not that it matters, cause I always have a calculator on hand now, cause phone. I talk to myself a lot, either in my head or out loud if I'm alone. A lot of people find this creepy or weird, like I should belong in an asylum or something, but in my experience it's really therapeutic. Thoughts become less convoluted and it's easier to remember things when I say them out loud, especially when in a rush to leave the house, etc. I'm an introvert also, so I definitely value alone time. You can be your own best friend at times, and it helps a lot to lay out where I'm at / where I want to be in life by talking to myself and laying out a plan. Sometimes, I'll drop something, but like before I've even dropped it, my body knows it's about to get dropped, so I'll do this reflex spasm thing and try to catch it, which causes me to drop the thing. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Sometimes I catch it, sometimes I don't, but if I do, all an observer sees is me flipping out like a geek. I did this about 5 minutes ago with a nice snickerdoodle. My wife of 6 years was the only witness, and she's used to me by now. I imagine she sees me standing there, glass of milk in one hand, cookie in the other, leaning against the fridge and happily munching away. Suddenly I do a Kramer-esque spasm, slash milk out of the glass, and now I'm holding the cookie, now icing side down, in a weirdly loose tense hand. Good God, how is she still with me? Talk to myself. I figured out, thanks to therapy for many other things, that this is actually a coping mechanism for something called a learning deficit. Basically, when you get an IQ test, you actually are getting different IQ tests for different categories: short-term memory, long-term memory, visual comprehension, and auditory comprehension were the ones that I got. As it so happens, my visual and auditory comprehension are way above average, while my short and long-term memory are average. So, since nobody stepped in to teach me bad coping techniques, I naturally developed useful ones. Specifically in this case, repeating things or thinking aloud, which seems to cement things into my memory more effectively. As an aside, I once had a coworker ask if I was talking to myself. My reply was, well, who the hell else am I going to have an intelligent conversation with around here? His jaw dropped and he was speechless for at least 30 seconds. It was hilarious. From time to time I've come to some conclusion or another, and, for whatever reason, someone wanted to know just how I got to that point. And so I will lay out the exact process by which I associated one thing with another, made a connection, or whatever, and the person invariably ends up frozen somewhere between horror and amazement, very likely for the same reason why I take, seemingly, circuitous routes to ideas. It took me a very long time to realize that most people aren't constantly formulating plans for every little part of their life. Like, they could walk into a known restaurant looking for a friend without first having considered every possible search pattern that might come into play, along with responses to every conceivable question should someone even bother to ask one along the way. I startle very easily. I have sensory issues, but touch, sight and sound are the worst affected. I'll never forget when I was about 16, so 15 years ago now, I was reading a bus timetable and a sweet old lady gently tapped me on the shoulder to ask about the buses, and I jumped out of my skin, and only just avoided screaming in fright at her. The other day an empty blister pack of tablets fell off a chest of drawers. Not a loud sound by any means, but it was unexpected, and that made me jump out of my skin too. I don't decorate my place. I don't really see a point. I prefer function over aesthetics. I do all kinds of weird shit, mostly because I am lazy or to save money. For example, I will cut the bottoms off of 2-liter bottles to use as disposable bowls so I don't have to wash dishes. I prefer to stay in bed all day when not at work. I do not own a couch or big chair. I took an old metal-framed glass-topped computer desk and modified it to fit over my bed. It has a laptop, TV, DVR and 2 security monitors on it. In summer and winter I construct a plastic tent over it so I can save money on heating, cooling since my place is so drafty. I made a large pillow out of the biggest duffel bag I could find and stuffed it with pillows so I could sit up against it in bed. It is almost like a large oblong bean bag. I conserve water by collecting the water that normally goes down the drain while waiting for it to turn hot so I can wash my hands or shower. That water is stored in 5-gallon water cooler bottles until I need to wash my clothes. The wastewater from washing clothes is used to flush my toilet by pouring it in the bowl. BTW, I use a portable electric washing machine to wash my clothes. Basically a small washing machine. Unless I'm in a professional setting like at work, I typically sit in chairs with my legs folded under me instead of touching the floor. In high school I used to sit with my knees up against my chest, and I would always get baffled looks from my classmates because if you've ever seen an American high school desk, there's not much distance between the desk and the attached chair. And so my classmates were wondering how TF I could ever sit like that and not feel cramped. I have overly flexible joints. Among other things, if I straighten my legs fully, my knees bend slightly backwards. I tore my ACL in my sleep a few years ago and went to the hospital about it. The triage nurse asked what happened to the wrong leg because it was bending the wrong way. If I stand up to attention, I faint. This has been investigated by a few doctors, a physiotherapist, my asthma nurse, and a cardiovascular consultant. Nobody knows why. Just 3 minutes standing up straight and I'm passed out on the floor. I've had this my entire life. I am a new Asian user, and English is not my native language, but because I grew up going to an international school, it became my mother tongue. Because I always think that acquiring a language on a fairly high level is a blessing, I always talk to myself in English whenever I do something. It is like talking to myself in a mirror, but another version of me is just patiently waiting inside to produce a response similar to what a foreign native speaker would say. I feel completely normal and sometimes obsessed over pronunciation, sentence structure, and the overall likeliness of the response in a real-life scenario. I've been doing this for a few years now, and my friends that have recently noticed this anxiety always give me a WTF is this guy doing look, but at the end of the day, they don't care, and it helps me retain my English. I'm half Italian, half French, and at home we speak both languages normally since my father is Italian and my mother is French. When we have guests and my dad asks me something, usually we talk in the language that the guests don't understand, and they're always stunned by the fact that I have literally no bad accent, like Italian accent when speaking French or French accent when speaking Italian. But for me it's totally normal because I grew up with this double nationality and double language. I can squat down by folding my knees up to my chest. Apparently this is somewhat uncommon for white people to have the knee flexibility to be able to do that. Common for people of Asian ancestry, uncommon for people of European ancestry. I'm the only one in my family who can do it. It's quite convenient. Sleeping on the floor. Now this is normal in cultures like Japan and South Korea, but not so much Vietnam where my family is originally from, and even then they're not sleeping directly on the literal floor, whereas I've slept on direct carpet with nothing underneath me, not because I'm too poor to afford a cheap futon but just because I like it that way. The most obvious thing is that I do engineering research for fun. That might mean robots, or sensor networks. One time it was a quantum tunneling RNG. The less obvious thing is that I sit at my desk and scheme, for much more time than the above hobby, for hours at a time, just sitting here staring at the wall or lying in bed, sifting through whatever I know and how I can use it to enrich myself in some material fashion. This is my most productive activity, and committing to it completely turned my life around. Run upstairs on all fours, kind of like a gorilla, chimpanzee, leading with both hands and then following with the legs. Completely normal to me. Also I have slightly prehensile toes, meaning I can easily pick stuff up without bending over and using my hands. In a student kitchen this meant I'd just walk around picking up rubbish, recycling with my feet and throwing it in the bin without my hands being involved at all. I think my housemates got used to me by the end of it.